This is going to be a continuation of the educational series that I do each month. So this month we're going to be talking about expenses, and the different things that we're going to talk about are right here. So budgeting, figuring out the expense per door, and then the OPEX ratio and what I look for in each one of these as I'm going through it. All right, next slide. All right, I have this stupid panel over here. There we go. All right, so here is an example of some underwriting we did on a deal. You can see in the left-hand column all the different expense categories, and then there's two kind of quadrants in the middle of the page. We have the current expenses as we get the financials from the seller, and then on the right side of the page or that quadrant is the year one pro forma that we figure out as we're underwriting. I threw some arrows in there, and we'll go over those. So as you're going through these, the important thing is when I'm looking through these, I figure out if it's a BS number, or how accurate are these. You'll find out that a lot of especially mom and pop multifamilies or smaller multifamilies, they keep very horrible books. They don't have records for a lot of things, and a lot of things they're doing themselves. So you're not getting an accurate picture of how much it costs to run it, because they're not, a lot of times if they're managing them themselves, they're not paying themselves. So they're essentially working for free, which if you take over the property, that's obviously not the case. So you don't want to falsely consider their expenses as they are, and then you go to operate that property, and all of a sudden your expenses, double or something like that. So like the very first one right there, so management fee. So they didn't have any management fee at all. And obviously that's not gonna be the case for us. This property is 4,000 miles away. We need a management fee in there. All right, so different things I look for on here. Taxes are taxes. You just go to the county site and figure out what the millage rate is for taxes and how often they do appraisals, and by what method do they do the appraisal. So some cities do them every year. Some do them every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. They'll do a reassessment. So you want to go to the county website for that specific county or city and figure out how they do this assessment, what the millage rate is. That way you can calculate what the taxes are going to be for you. Don't take the taxes as they are, because if they bought this property 10, 15 years ago, as soon as you buy it and it goes through a reassessment, the taxes could double. And also another one is if the last sale is considered for taxes or not. Some states do. Every time there's a sale, capital or event on the title, they'll do a reassessment and bring the tax rate up to that. Some states they don't. Like Texas is irrelevant to the sale is irrelevant. They'll do assessment completely separate of a sale. So you just want to know what that is for your local market. Insurance is a big one. You can notice I put arrows next to insurance, right? So their insurance was $264. Ours was $521. So our insurance was double their insurance. And the big reason for that is one, you have to go call your broker, everything like that, and try to shop around. But they had a really bad insurance policy. So their insurance policy was so bad that they actually filed a hail claim a few years back, and they got fined from the insurance company $40,000 because the property wasn't insured adequately. So if you ever read insurance policies, if you do a claim and the adjuster goes out there and they figure out that you don't have the correct amount of insurance, you can actually get penalized for that from the insurance company. And that's what happened here, is they were carrying pretty much a garbage policy, and then when they went to go execute it or use it and file a claim, they got fined for it. So when I got ours, it was $521 a door, which is now outrageously expensive. So the average for this market should be around $350, but I feel like we're getting penalized a little bit for this property because of what the other seller did. But the biggest thing on this is don't take their number, like, oh, well, they got a $12,000 policy for insurance. Like, I can get that too. You want to get a really good broker, and I'll talk about this in a little bit later, and make sure that they're shopping around and getting you the best deal, and then walking through different quotes with you. Don't just have them send you a quote and just like, okay, just sign here. Like, they need to get on the phone and walk through every single paragraph. What does this cover? What doesn't it cover? What are some scenarios? Why is this number this? Why is this number that? And if your broker right now isn't doing that, either have them do it or find a different broker. Okay, next one, you can see the huge thing here with the maintenance and repairs. They're at $82 a door. This is real numbers, by the way. This is a real deal that we did. $82 a door per year for maintenance and repairs. Obviously, that's not realistic. This is a 1980s build, kind of C-class property. Hasn't really been taken care of well the last year or two. A lot of deferred maintenance. This should be at around $600 a door. Between that $500 and $600 a door per year range. So this tells me two things. One, they are really bad at bookkeeping, or two, they're slumlords and don't fix anything. So it's one or the other, because there's no way that they're operating, a habitable, safe, clean complex at $82 a door per unit in a property that was built in 1984. So that is a huge red flag for me that I'm going to inquire later on and figure out, what it means to my budget. Going down to contract services. So this is another one that people seem to just copy and paste. And you can see we did it in here because at the time we didn't have quotes back. But the contract services, these are things that people just adopt, but without ever inquiring. A lot of times you can go call and renegotiate all of your contracts before you take over the policy or take over the property. You don't need to take, if their trash is $300 a door, you don't need to take that because that's what they paid. You can negotiate that. So contract services are another point. General admin, they had none. Marketing, they had none. So how are they marketing this property? They had a lot of vacancies when we looked at it, which makes sense because they didn't have a marketing budget at all. Their marketing budget was a Facebook site that they didn't use with posts that were 6 months old. So they didn't have a marketing budget. They didn't have any kind of back office support in their budget. On-site payroll, they did have that. So that was they had an on-site payroll, and that's why they didn't have a management fee. Utilities, call and vet all the utilities. Call the water company, call the electric company, call the gas company, and make sure those numbers are accurate. So a lot of times they won't tell you the numbers for that specific property, but you can kind of coax them into what's normal for that size property. And they usually give that up. All right. And then the biggest numbers I see here, I think the arrows got taken off. Dude, can you click the screen? I think I might've did an animation. Is there? No. Okay. Go back. I'm sorry. Anyway, I had more arrows, but they seem to have disappeared. So you can see on where it says annually 87,000 and the other one's 141,000, the number underneath it is the OPEX ratio. That is a key number that we figure out, and I exploit the crap out of that number because if it's really low, like that, 29% is really low, I will call BS on the sellers in a very tactful way because there's no way that they're operating a safe, clean, habitable complex at 29% OPEX ratio. And then the other side of it is if it's like 60% or 65%, I am going to have big exclamation points in my head because now I've found an opportunity, which I'll talk about in a minute, to exploit in my business plan. And if that's the case, I'm not going to say anything because I know I can run this property more efficiently than what they're operating at. So if that number was, double, like I said, like 60 or 65, which we see a lot, I know that I can go in there and immediately cut expenses probably 10 to 15%, within a quarter or two, which is huge boost to NOI. Literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of value added in a very, very short amount of time. Okay. And that's it on this. Any questions on this before we go on to the next one? Expenses. So you want to look at theirs, map it, figure out what their OPEX ratio is. But then when you're building your pro forma, you really want to go through each one of these line items. Don't skip on this stuff. You want to go through it and really vet and do your due diligence on each one of these numbers. All right. And let me go.
Remember, if you want Vince to kind of touch on any of this later, just type your questions down in the chat box and we'll make sure we get to them after we kind of finish up a little bit later.
Yep. So we can just go on to the next slide. I always go too slow here. Did somebody say something? Let's keep moving. Okay. That was from Duke. Thanks, Duke. All right. Budgeting and pro forma. So the deal, when you're looking at that, the important things to do from the expense cash flow side is the deal needs to cash flow at closing using their numbers. Okay. Because one of the things is even if their OPEX ratio is 60%, you can't plan to cut the expenses overnight, right? You can do it in a very short amount of time with probably a high degree of confidence, but the deal still needs to cash flow. It's not going to be immediately, the day you close, all of a sudden now you go from a 60% OPEX to a 45 or 50, and the place is cash flowing crazy. Like all that stuff takes time. So the deal still needs to cash flow using their numbers at close. So don't skimp there. And then goes right into the second point. Don't expect to move mountains in year one. What I see a lot is people will do their at acquisition budget, or the sellers, and then their year one, and they have like this huge grand plan, which is probably closer to like a 3-year plan built, and they're trying to do it in 1 year. And there's just no way of knowing with a high degree of confidence that they can make that happen. They're being a little overzealous because what they're not accounting for is that next point there is the plan usually gets worse. The property usually gets worse after acquisition before it gets better. And we see this all the time. We've lived through it because you're going to have a lot of contracts being turned over. You're going to have repairs and CapEx items that you didn't catch the first time. You're going to have bids that you got from contractors that all of a sudden now they cost 10 to 20% more. You're going to have, tenants move out. You're going to have a bunch of tenants move out or have to get evicted right when you acquire. So the financials usually take a pretty big dip in the first, month or 2 or 3 after acquisition. And you have to build back up. And a lot of people don't plan that. They think it's on a trajectory and it's just going to stay that. But really it goes down first and you have to build it back up. So don't expect to move mountains in year one, and the deal has to cash flow on actuals. And I always just use the humbling phrase of like, what makes me think I can do better than them, right? Like, yeah, I might have a couple skills or whatever, but if this is the way that they're operating at, like, I shouldn't expect me to do any better. So because of that, the deal still needs to cash flow at closing, because otherwise, if anything goes wrong, you're going to be in a position where you're going to be negative cash flow and having to come out of pocket to keep the place afloat until you can get it repositioned. All right. What else we got? Actually, go back one. There's something missing from this. That's really weird. So there's another bullet underneath this, and for some reason on my one screen I'm looking at it, and on the screen here I'm not seeing it. Anyway, the last bullet is look for opportunities. Expenses increase NOI faster than revenue, and I say this a lot. It's one of my favorite things to look for. Is I always look for opportunities to exploit on a seller's expense sheet. I know that I'm pretty good at finding inefficiencies in operations, and I can take over a property and plan a pro forma a 2, 3, 4, 5 year pro forma and really get a place running pretty smoothly, pretty efficiently. So I look for those opportunities. And remember what I said before was, the property that I just showed in that snapshot, they were operating at a 30% OPEX ratio. So I go back to the broker or the seller, like, look, this is not realistic. There's no way that they're operating, a clean, safe. So they're either not reporting everything, or this place has a lot of deferred maintenance. Conversely, if this place was at 60, 65%, I'm not really going to say anything. I'm just going to say, because in their pro forma, they're probably going to have the expenses down in the seller, the broker's OM, the offer memorandum. They're probably going to have the pro forma where the OPEX is at 50%. But if their current is at 65, I'm going to say, what makes you think I can do better than them? They're at 65%. Like, I'm going to be at 65%. You're telling me I can operate it for 50 when they can't. So I'm going to play that and, completely flip that card. Because they're going to try to tone it down that, this place is high expense, and the brokers are going to try to tone it down. But my response is, what makes you think I can do it better than them? Right. So I always look for opportunities. And then I always say, again, before, what I said was expenses increase NOI faster than revenue does. So $1 saved in expenses is worth more than $1 increased in revenue. So raising the rent $1 is not worth as much as decreasing the expenses $1. They're two different shades of money, and revenue is extremely important. It's the lifeblood of any business. But for the purpose of this and running efficiently and increasing the NOI, you can increase the NOI a lot faster. You can get a really good bump in a property in that first, second, third year, just from decreasing the expenses, getting the place running efficiently, and then shifting gears and focusing on increasing revenue. And that's just our plan. That's our business model. It makes sense in my head. So any questions on that, we can discuss. All right.
Just
what else?
One quick thing to add to that point is, or if you take 50% rule as a ballpark rule of thumb, then every $1 of expenses that you save is worth $2 of revenue. So that's kind of like a ballpark thing to think about.
Yes. All right. Let's skip down to the slide where we're at. You're missing slides. I thought this was Google Sheets. It's supposed to be live.
Yeah. So we're on the breaking news. Do you see my screen?
I see your screen. It says breaking news,
yeah,
but it's not. There's like 3 slides missing. I don't know why.
Oh,
it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just press with it. So the OPEX ratio, 50% is that rule of thumb. It's not a magic number, but it's a good place to start and then move up or down depending on what's normal in your market. All right. And then the last point was, you want to figure out your average expense per door for the market that you're in. So whenever you're looking at a market, you first define the product you're looking at, a B class or C class property. And then you want to go down your spreadsheet to all those expenses that we covered. And you want to find out what those numbers are for the property that you're looking for. Because it's going to be different for a to a B to a C class. And it's going to be different from every single market that you're in. So whenever you're investigating a market and doing your research, you want to fill out some market research sheets or some example, some spreadsheets to figure out what the normal expense per door in that market is. And once you have it, it could be C-class property is $3,400 a year per door. And once you do, say maybe 5 or 6 different tests on this, you get some OMs, you underwrite some deals, you'll be able to zone in on that number really well for whatever that property class is in that market. And what you can do is use that as a very quick metric. And I like this better than the 50% rule. So the 50% rule for OPEX is, like I said, a very, very general rule of thumb. Having the expense per door, what does that say? Yes, that's the same thing. So expense per door, expense per unit is the same thing. So once you figure out what your average expense per door is for that market, you can very quickly look at OMs or look at financials and see if there's opportunity in that deal for reducing expenses, or if they are just way off the mark. Like if you know that a B class property in this market is $4,200 a door, which is probably pretty close for most Midwest markets, and they're saying, oh well, our place runs at 27, right? A huge red flag. Like there's no way. Like I've under 15 deals in this market, and the average is 42 a door. What makes you think that you can run this place more efficiently than everyone else in town? You're gonna have to show me something pretty crazy with your deal, with your property that you're doing that everybody else in town doesn't know about. Because I know the average expense per door in this market is $4,200 a year. So that is the importance of doing that. And you can use that as a litmus test for looking at deals and very quickly screening properties and looking for opportunities. And like I said, conversely, if they were at $6,000 a door and it's 42, you're like, holy crap, that's a big opportunity. How do you find the average expense per door per unit? I call around to vendors. So if it's utilities, I call the utility companies. For management companies, I call management companies a lot. And I'll start there. For management companies, I'll call brokers. I'll talk to them a lot. But I call each one of these. I'll call the tax assessor, and I'll play dumb on the tax assessor and be like, hey, I just moved here. Tell me how assessments work and everything like that, and have them walk me through the entire process so I'm not missing anything. Repairs and maintenance, I usually talk to property managers or other investors in the market for that one. Yeah. So between other investors, property managers, and brokers, I can zero in on what it is, and then obviously underwriting more deals. So the more deals I get, the more I can underwrite, the more that average, that those data points keep hitting on that bell curve, and you really start zoning in on what the average expense per door is. And then just remember, it's not a one size fits all. It's every market is different, and every class of property in that market is going to be different. So you're going to want to create like a kind of like a package for each market that you're in. All right. So I'm not sure what happened. Screen, they're not there. I don't know. Anyway, breaking news. This is Michigan. This was the town of, I think this is Sanford. They had heavy rains, and they had some heavy rains. They actually 3 dams in Michigan busted and leveled 3 towns. So it's like Edenville, Sanford, and Midland, Saginaw, Bridgeport, and some of Bay City got pretty destroyed. So one of our property actually have 20 units in Midland, and all of them missed the flooding. So super lucky there. One of our properties, an 8-unit that we own, did not fare so well, and the whole first floor got completely leveled. So let's go on to the next screen. Yeah, look, there's some dams. That's what a dam looks like when it breaks. Lots of water. All right. Yep, that's a downtown area park, it looks like. I think it's Edenville. All right, so this is one of our properties, is Haven Oaks. You can kind of see where the water got up to. And this place has like a full basement too. So it completely filled the full basement, or the basement, plus the first floor units. So that this is it getting remediated. demoed. So they're going in here, cutting everything out. All right, you can keep going. Okay, yep, there you go. Yep, some more pictures of them cutting some stuff out. All right, so takeaways of this. So obviously, I'm as the operations officer for the company, I'm very heavily involved in the renovation, remediation, getting this place back operational. So key takeaways for this was before we bought this property, I actually do this on our properties, is I call the city departments, either, planning, zoning, or whoever the Chamber of Commerce area, usually the smaller towns, it's all kind of one small office. And I asked them, especially if I see anything weird on like FEMA maps. I didn't put that on here, but I thought I did. But yeah, so I'll obviously check FEMA maps first to see where it's at in the 100-year floodplain or waterways and stuff like that, and what the grade is or where it's at compared to the water in the not the floodplain, the water table, because you kind of see that. So FEMA map's really good. But then I go one step further. I call the city and be like, hey, this is the area I'm looking at. Does it have any history? And I did that for this property. And yes, they said, yes, this place flooded, 10 years ago. It was pretty bad. Require flood insurance. And they built like this kind of dam or like a dike around the property, which kind of tipped off that, hey, this place probably flooded at one time. So we knew that going in. So I called the city. They sent me this big, huge package from the last flood. I got to read through it, see what the issues were, how close it is to the waterway, everything like that. We bought flood insurance. I have a good insurance broker that went through the policy, went through the history, and gave us a great policy. And like I mentioned earlier with the other property, that not all policies are created equal. Sure, you can be legally, covered and meet, the lender's requirements for liability and whatever coverage, but doesn't mean that the policies are apples to apples. So you want a good broker to go through and really advise you on what coverage you should have and why. Luckily, we have that, and they gave us a great policy, both liability and flood insurance policy, to where we're not going to come out of pocket for anything on this. It's going to be completely covered with our policies. One of the important points is don't skip on business interruption coverage. So business interruption is not mandatory. And this is stuff that you're not going to see on residential. So a huge difference between, huge difference between commercial properties and residential properties, meaning 4 units or less, is that all the people that owned 4 units or less are essentially screwed, because they probably got their basic triple fire insurance policies and that's it. And a triple fire policy for a landlord essentially doesn't cover anything. And I know that because I've had claims where I had a triple fire insurance policy for a landlord and the place flooded and I didn't get a dime of anything. I had to come completely out of pocket, where my neighbor got completely covered because they lived in the property. So that's a huge difference between residential landlord policies and a commercial business policy. Is you're actually going to get some real coverage. I was really upset when a few years ago when I had to file a claim on my residential, my duplex that flooded, to find out that those policies are essentially worthless. So another side of that is, coming back to this, is business interruption coverage. So we run a business. We have an LLC. It's this business income. This is an asset that drives revenue to our company. We can get business interruption coverage, which is an option. It's optional. And you're not going to automatically get it. It's an option that you need to, check the box, tell your broker that you want it. And then anything that interrupts your revenue stream, you get covered for that loss. So we're going to get completely covered, not just for the revenue, or not just for the repairs and remediation, but also for all of the lost revenue until the day this place is put back into service. So don't skip on business interruption insurance. next one here. So this is a tip that I got from the adjuster. The adjuster actually called me and, or not the adjuster, the restoration company agent called me. He's like, hey, you need to call the utility companies and have service shut off. I'm like, the whole town's flooded. I'm like, I'm sure service is shut off. And he's like, I know, it probably is. However, call them anyway, so it's on record that shows that you called in and you're a responsible landlord, and that you can call in. You're on their phone record saying that you went and you shut off electrical service. You went in and shut off the water service, the gas service to that building. And so he was like, yeah, it's one of those things that it might never come up, but if it does, it shows that you're being a responsible owner, a business owner, a responsible landlord, and you're making the place safe and trying to mitigate any further losses. So just call them. He's like, it's 99% chance it's shut off anyway, but you want to get on their phone record showing that you had called in. So tip for you. Also, obviously, communicate with the residents. Let them know, this is what's going on. This is what's going on with the property. This is why we can't move back in. These are some of the issues. This is a timeline. This is what we can do for you, and this is what we can't do for you, right? And then have a call with your insurance broker before you make the call to your residents, so you don't end up promising something that you can't deliver on. Like, we're going to pay for you to move, and we're going to put you up into a hotel until this place is habitable. Because if that's not in your insurance policy, you're coming out of pocket to make that happen. On the other side, you may not even be required, depending on whatever the situation is, to do anything for the resident, right? So obviously you want to be human about the situation and do as much as you can for them, but you don't want to put yourself in dire straits and commit something to them, and then you find out your insurance is not covering for them to be relocated, and you're having to come out of pocket to relocate 8 people or put them up for 3 months in a hotel. That could obviously not be good for you if your insurance is not going to cover it. All right. And encourage renters to get renter's insurance. I know for lower class properties, this can be, another added expense for them that they probably don't want to get. But you could either make it mandatory for them or highly encourage them. You can work with insurance companies to where, it's kind of offered in like a package deal, as a resident, move-in package. When they sign the lease, I'm like, okay, here's who you call for your cable. Here's who you call for your renter's insurance. And you can broker deals with companies to get like bulk discounts on things like renter insurance and stuff like that. So it might be as little, $5 a month. So encourage them to get that, and then work with reputable restoration companies. Again, they're not all created equal. The restoration company I worked with 3 years ago when my duplex flooded, they did the job. They remediated the area, the sewer backup water, cleaned it up, and did everything. The work was good. And then stark contrast to who I'm doing with now. They are communicating with me, couple times a day. They're advising me on what to do and how to do it. They're calling the insurance company and the adjuster on my behalf and negotiating best terms for me, because they've been working in the industry for 40 years and they know how to, what everything to say, how to say it to get us the best deal and most use out of our insurance policy. They know, what is covered and what's not covered. They know how to get things framed in a way that is going to be covered in the policy for things that I might just forget or not even think about that would be covered. So they're just going to be a lot more experienced because there's stuff that I wouldn't have thought about to cover. And then he brought it up. He's like, well, you're going to have this expense that's directly due to this flooding. Did you think about that? I'm like, no, I didn't. And that just like on one sentence, he saved us, a couple grand. So use a reputable restoration company that knows the business and will work with the adjusters on your behalf. Okay. Is that it? I think that's it. I think I'm done talking.
Awesome. Matt,
you're up.
Fact. Yeah. We like to do a fun fact. You guys know that. So this month's fun fact about El Paso, it actually has a gigantic man-made star on the side of the Franklin Mountain that's 400 feet tall and more than 300 feet wide, and it's lit up by more than 400 light bulbs. So I kind of equate it to the Hollywood sign of El Paso, but I think it looks a lot better. It's probably one of the most iconic. I would even call it a piece of art in El Paso. You fly in at night or you're driving down the highways, you see it lit up, and it's something really cool to see in person. We got a photo there, you can see it, but just a massive star. You can actually hike up to it, actually, similar to the Hollywood sign. So, pretty cool feature.
Cool.
All right, so leasing. So for us on that 48 unit deal, we had this kind of grand marketing plan, but we're getting a lot of organic leads through our property manager, Zach. So he's been killing it there. So we haven't had to deploy some of the tactics that we normally use. But a new program that we're rolling out soon is a military referral program. We found that a lot of our new residents are coming from Fort Bliss. They're Army. So we're going to offer $100 off first month's rent for referrals to other vets. And we're also targeting marketing for Fort Bliss housing. So for April, we closed April 15th. We had 3 leases signed. May, we had 2 leases signed. And June, we had 3 leases signed. And as far as occupancy, so when we initially closed this, it was 75% occupancy, and now we're up to 85%. We have 7 vacancies, and economic vacancy is around 24% right now. Back to you, Matt.
Slides are a little slow updating on me. It still says occupancy. Oh, okay. So our CapEx projects, they're all going pretty well for the most part. Monument sign is getting done. I'm not sure if we have pictures, but it would look like a metal skeleton of a sign. Nothing too exciting yet, but we're hoping to roll that out once it's installed. Electrical's all been laid for the new monument sign, still shooting on first week of July to put that sign in. Parking lot should be done hopefully by the end of this week. Thanks, Steve. Parking lot should be done this week. They're moved up to the front portion of that. We've had to get our property manager involved with just kind of monitoring the progress there, but more to come. We'll see what it looks like once they finish. Landscaping has been put in, all new Franklin Red Rock. 7 vacant units. Let's see, stairs haven't started yet. Well, they've done a couple, but the mass overhaul of stairs completed. You guys have seen, or maybe not, but the pictures of the LED lighting that we put in just to make it safer, lowers the liability of trips and falls, theft, any other kind of crimes. We don't really seem to have a problem with it in the area, but the lighting. Is there pictures of it, Duke?
No, not on this.
That was from the last time already.
But if you just look around the area, they've got those old yellow lights that are just really unsightly. They don't do a good job. We put in all new LED lights, and it really brightened up the space. And so far, we've had 8 units that were made ready to be filled with tenants.
Cool. Is that me? Want me to take it?
I'm just on the slide to change on my end.
All right, I'll take it because it sounds like you got a delay on your slide. So this is just the front of the building. The picture on the left, there used to be a crummy old sign kind of right to the right of that light pole. And we demoed that. It was really crappy old sign. The new sign's going to go right to kind of in the front bottom right. Yeah, right where Duke's cursor is. That's going to be a big, 10-foot sign is going to go right there. So it's going to really attract a lot of the traffic off that frontage road because you can see how far back that other sign was, way back in the corner. There's actually a tree in front of it too that we also took the small tree out. So it was not lit up. It was back recessed in the property and there was a tree in front of it. So it was kind of worthless. So we're going to move it right up front. It's going to be big, bright, lit up. So it's going to get a lot of visibility from the road. And you can see they had the Bobcat in there and they took out all the old crummy landscaping and you can go through the slides and kind of see the progress as they're putting in this 1.25 inch Franklin red rock that was from the quarry right down the road. Yeah, you just kind of go through slides. Yeah, looks so nice. Yep. So now the whole property has this nice, good landscaping. All the trees have been, trimmed up. It's going to look a lot different. And then obviously the parking lot is getting redone right now too. So the entire exterior of this property is going to look unrecognizable, in a week or two once these exterior renovations are coming up. So if you can go back one slide. So right where that dumpster is in this picture, there's dumpster in those cars. There's a fence there that used to be another entrance to the back road, and at some point they closed off that entrance, and it has like a 4,500 square foot like spot of just dead space in the back of this property, separating it from that back road and our complex from that used to be a driveway at some point. And so one of the things we're going to do is we have about I think we have like 10 pets in the property, or maybe a little bit more. I think maybe 10 to 12 pets in the property, dogs. And we want to give them a place and utilize that space. So if you go to the next slide, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to turn that dead space into a dog park. So we had our person draw up a rendering of what this dog park is going to look like, some new fencing, some sail shades, a couple features for the dogs to do their thing on, and then some benches. You can go to the next slide. I think there's another view of it. Yep, there you go. So some benches under the shades. It's going to look really nice and give the residents a place to go with their pets. All right. And in this market, right, the second benefit is that in this market we can charge $25 pet fee per pet. So that's kind of the indirect ROI for something like that, is that we can attract responsible pet owners and get some fee income from that. So this is a rendering we did on our property. There used to be a pool, and they had since filled in that pool, which a lot of people do when it comes time to resurface it or replace it. They end up just filling it in, and that's what they did here. But they haven't really done anything. They just kind of filled it in with rocks and put like a cactus on it and called it a day. One of the things that we saw was when we took over the property, there's a lot of residents that have barbecues, like the little Weber kettles outside their doors, and they like to barbecue and everything like that. And that our property manager, as we were doing our walk around, tenants even asked like, hey, are we still gonna be able to barbecue? I don't like that, even though I love barbecuing, because one, it creates a liability issue of people barbecuing next to the building. And two, if they don't clean up after themselves, now you have, a bunch of coals and ashes and everything like that. If they don't dispose of the coals properly, and it's just an issue, and then it just doesn't look good. When you're driving through the property, a bunch of barbecue grills that are all like, greasy and not, kept up well or covered. So one of the things that we did is, we don't want to go in and say, hey, barbecue grills are off limits without giving them an option. So this is going to be that give to them is, hey, our new policy is going to be, you can't have your own personal grill, but look, we just invested and we created a picnic area for you. We installed grills. We have the hot coal bin for you to dispose. We have the sunshades, so you're not, baking out in the sun. And this project here is going to be fairly inexpensive to do this, and we feel like it's going to add a lot of value to the residents, while also having that second, order effect of making the entryways of their units, the ones that had grills, not so dirty. So we're not just going in there dropping the hammer and saying, okay, no more grills, right? We're going to be like, here, we created this thing for you. So that's one of the things we're doing as well. This is going to be like a Q4 project for this property. So toward the end of the year. All right. This is our Gantt chart for our project timeline, phase 1. This is kind of where we're at. As we're just trucking along down this line here, you can kind of see we're at the kind of point where the monument sign's just about ready to go in. Parking lot reseal is actually going to be finished up, tomorrow, I think is their timeline, tomorrow or Thursday. They're supposed to be done. And then the stairs are going to be getting started. So that's where we're at right now. I think we pushed the renovation of vacant units, got pushed down a little bit. And a lot of that is because we had, like Duke was saying with the leasing, people are moving in really fast. So we had this plan to renovate these vacant units to a higher level that are going to take more time. But then people are coming into him without any marketing saying, hey, we need a unit. So he's switching gears to, okay, let's put off the heavy renovation units and get the ones that are easier that don't need as much work. Let's get them cleaned up, painted, and market ready, because I got this person that's waiting to move in at market rate right now. So that's what's been happening, is that the leasing is going so well that we're pushing the heavy renovations down the line a little bit to take advantage of how hot the market is right now. So it's a good problem to have. And they'll be done in about the end of this month anyway, the rest of the vacant units. What was Michael's question? How do you get the time estimates for Gantt chart? I'm guessing you asked the contractors, but do you go as far as get 3 bids? Yes, we do all of those. So we ask the contractors, we get the bids. We put it on an Excel sheet, and this is where, kind of our project management hat comes in process. We ask them how long it takes, how much it's going to cost. We add a buffer to that, 10 to 20% is normal, what you do, the fudge factor. So if they say 2 weeks, make it 3, because there's always going to be something that comes up. They say 20,000, make it 25,000 when you actually are doing your planning. And that's how we do it. We always get 3 bids. There's some stuff on this one where we didn't get 3 bids because Zach is taking on the project anyway. But anything that we hired out, we got like the parking lot. We got 3 bids for the sign. We got 2 bids for landscaping. Even though Zach, property manager, took on that project, we still got another quote for that one just to make sure that we're in line for what's normal in that market. But yeah, always get multiple bids and get their timeline, and then put your project management hat on and add fudge factor to both their timeline and their cost. All right. Is it me? Cost segregation. All right. So cost segregation, if nobody knows what that is yet, if you're unfamiliar, what it is you take a property and you break it down to its components. So you take, house, and instead of doing straight line depreciation on that house at 27.5 years, you hire these engineers to go into this house, and they will go in and they will figure out the expected life expectancy for the different components of that house based off of their inspection. So instead of 27.5 years, which is straight line depreciation, they'll go in and say carpet, 5 years, windows, 10 years, roof, 8 years, appliances, 5 years, plumbing, 15 years or 20 years, whatever. And they go down like dozens of categories, and they assign different life expectancy to your house. And then what you can do is, once you get that, when it comes to tax time, you can depreciate your asset. So you take the land out of it, because you can't depreciate land, but you take the improvements, the house, and you can depreciate your paper losses, right? So you can take your paper losses at different levels based off of that cost segregation study. So they put the house into these buckets, right? So you have like a 5-year bucket, a 7-year bucket, a 15-year bucket, 20-year bucket, 27.5-year bucket. And so everything that's in the 5-year bucket is getting depreciated across 5 years. Everything that's in the 7-year across 7 years, everything 10 years, and so on. So if you have, $100,000 in that 5-year bucket, then you're getting a $20,000 write-off every single year. Okay, so that's essentially what cost segregation is taking a big house, breaking it down into its components, and putting them on different life cycles for your depreciation schedule. When you couple this with your the law that's out for bonus depreciation, excuse me, it really turbocharges a deal, because you can take anything that's I think it's 15 years or less that was identified in a bucket 15 years or less. You can depreciate 100% of that in year one. So if you have $1 million asset, the engineers go in and they say, out of this $1 million asset, we think, $500,000, fall in this 15-year bucket or less. You're going to be able to take $500,000 of losses in year one, right? Which is pretty amazing, because you're going to wipe out essentially all of the income that you make on that property, and you can carry forward losses that you don't get to take. So you can take losses down to zero, and whatever's left, you can go and carry it forward to the next year. And then with the new law that just passed with this CARES Act, not only can you carry it to the future, now for I guess in the rest of the year, maybe even next year, you can actually carry it into the past. So there's losses that I wasn't able to take because I already took my losses down to zero essentially. And I could either take that money and wait those paper losses and wait till next year to file them against future earnings. Or with the CARES Act, I was able to do an amendment on my 2018 taxes and push a loss back to 2018 and get a return essentially from 2018 taxes that I filed 2 years ago. So that's pretty amazing. So this is something like the insurance policy. This is something you don't get on residential because it's just not, it's the cost of doing the cost segregation is prohibitive. You're not going to spend, $5 or 10 grand to do this for a house, but the 5 or 10 grand that it costs to do it on a commercial property is worth every single penny to do this. So it's an amazing, amazing tool. We don't budget for this. We don't underwrite, or we budget for it. We don't underwrite for whatever the expected return is. It's just icing on the cake, essentially. So we say, hey, we're going to do a cost segregation study, and then whatever happens, whatever the engineers come up with, it's icing on the cake for us. But we do not write it into our pro forma. Okay, see some questions here. Somebody about fat-fingered something. At the end of depreciation term, i.e. roof gets replaced, CapEx. At the end of it, okay. Is that an answer? Is there an industry standard for how much you should pay for someone to figure this out? I don't know if there's an industry standard. From what we've seen, it's usually 5,000 to 10,000. All right, and then I'm not sure on Sam's question. At the end of the depreciation term, i.e. roof gets replaced, CapEx.
So the question, sorry, the question was, my thumb got fatter than I thought it did. But anyway, the question is, so I'd say like at the end of the 5-year cost segregation term, right? So you write off the remaining, say 20%.
Yep.
But because it's a roof and it needs to get replaced, you get it replaced, and so you recapture that as a capital expense on your taxes as well, right?
Exactly.
So in the last year of every term for these cost segregated items, they're kind of like, I guess, double dipping almost, not double dipping, but kind of getting double the tax write-offs.
Not a CPA. Not gonna answer. I don't know the correct way to answer that. So I'm not gonna try. But
okay.
What we do, so we do the cost segregation study, but at the same time, going into a property, we've already done our inspections and we know what CapEx items are coming up. So we front load our CapEx coffers for those expected things. Like I said, the roof in 5 years. If you go into a property and your roof is going to be toast in 5 years and you're not, especially the size of properties we're doing, and you're not already raising funds for that at closing, then you're putting yourself in a really bad position for when it's actually due. But yeah, CPA
Okay.
is the right
Got
answer.
it. Thanks.
All right. Where are we at? That's it for cost seg, huh? We did it. We started our cost seg. That was, I think, all I was supposed to say on that slide.
We started the cost tag. We also started the CASHFLOW project, which is our new podcast. So if you haven't already, we'd appreciate you subscribing on whichever platform that you listen to. And then if your platform offers the ability for a rating or a review, we'd appreciate if you could leave us those as well. We've put out now, 10, 11 episodes?
Yeah, 10 episodes.
10 episodes. So if you haven't heard those, please check them out. They're going to keep coming. I think that you'll find that we have some pretty interesting guests with more scheduled. So check out the CASHFLOW project and subscribe now.
Good plug.